Ken.
All right, thank you, Carl. We'll just wait for the recording to start. Maybe the recording button is just spinning right now. Dan, can you hit record on your end?
It's showing that it's recording, Ken.
Oh, and it just started. Okay, it just started. All right. So, all right. So, thank you, Tim and Bratmar, for taking minutes. So, the first item on our agenda tonight is a update on fiscal year 22. The topics listed by Mr. Dede under this is an update on disbursement of federal funds, review of district E&D policy, and review of the DESI advisory and transportation stabilization. Before we go to there, Superintendent McCall, you're on our meeting tonight, which is not our typical, or not typically graced with your presence at Business and Finance. So are you here for a particular item on the agenda that you'd like to address if you weren't planning to be here for the whole meeting?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Well, we're happy to have you as part of our meeting.
Great, thank you.
So Dan, do you want to, so is there anything to say about disbursement of federal funds? I saw we did get an email with an attachment about something today. What would you like to talk about under this topic?
So just very quickly, Ken, and to the members of the committee, again, good evening, and sorry about the hiccup a few minutes ago. Darrow, in his notes from the commissioner. Hi there.
Oops.
We good to go? All right. So Darrow, in his update that he shared with leadership the other day, the commissioner made a comment that districts should be receiving their allocations within 2 weeks' time, and that it would, at least the other day, it would be 2.5 times the SR2 number. I guess, you know, we wait and see what the actual number is, because things can certainly change at the last minute. That's for sure. Darryl, is there anything else that you have that maybe I missed there?
No, just it probably the 2.2, the 2.2 times the amount. It probably brings us to around what 1.4, 1.5 million dollars in terms of that. Whatever we're called, it's not even. I guess we call it SR3. Is really the terminology for it. There's the time frame for it is the money is coming from the federal government to the state. The state will then, you know, make it available through grants, and we will do our application process probably in the same way that we've done with SR1 and we're doing with SR2 right now.
So in terms of federal funds, this is how is this? And Dan, would you mind? I get a lot of feedback through your mic. If you could just maybe mute when you're not talking, because I think without the earpiece, it just gives a lot of feedback.
Okay.
Yep. How does this relate to other federal funds we're anticipating with regards to stimulus funds? Like how? Because I know one goes to the state and one is kind of like directly earmarked. So what do we know about that?
So this is the direct earmark. So when Bill Bell, who's in charge of finance for DESI, spoke with superintendents Monday or Tuesday afternoon, he said this is the money that's coming directly to districts. So that's why we're seeing it, and it's 2.2 whatever we had for SR2. So that's where you get like the 1.4, 1.5 million dollars. There's also money coming to the state in terms of just millions and millions of dollars to help support school districts and communities around, getting kids into school, jobs, COVID, all those types of things. What will probably happen is I know there's going to be a grant to help pay for some summer programming for schools. So it's really a kind of a remedial process. I think it's called like an Achievement Academy that would occur the last week of August. And it would be grant funded, but the state's covering everything. It would cover all the costs. So I'm sure there will be more funds. So the state's holding on to more funds. They're not necessarily designating what those funds are going toward at this moment right now.
And for this 1.4 that we feel, obviously it's fluid, but we feel okay about, what are the restrictions in terms of time and what we can use that on?
I think the restrictions will be limited. So the ESSER 1 money was extremely limited, and then I think what they found out was that it was just absolutely ridiculous to try to, force people, to spend money on things that they really don't need. Versus, hey, we need to update our HVAC system in our building. So, what ESSER 3 will be, it will allow us to probably tap into funds to pay for almost anything in terms of buildings, in terms of PPE, in terms of tech, in terms of student support. Remember, 20% of this ESSER 3 money has to go toward remedial student support, summer schools, those types of things. So all that will also be rolled into that amount. But it's not as stringent as the first grant that came through back in early September, October.
School reopening grant, the 1.5, the 1.572 and change.
Yeah, and the school reopening grant from the state was actually we actually had more flexibility with that one. What's nice about these next sets of grants is that we could, if we need to, we can tap into those to actually help pay for some of the work on, maybe an HVAC system, something else that is coming into play right now.
Do other members want to ask questions about this bullet point?
I had a question about the funds we don't know about yet. There was something in the news this week about funds specifically for testing. And I didn't know if you've heard any updates on that, because I was actually asked this week, and just didn't know if there was any update. That's an area I know we haven't figured out in our budget yet, or even figured out a plan for. So knowing the funding available might be helpful.
Yeah, so we do know that there's funding available for 6 weeks worth of testing.
Yeah, no, I meant the federal. This is a federal level. Apparently, there's some large amount designated specifically for testing.
Yeah, Biden said that he was going to put out, and it's an awful lot of money. I think it's in the hundreds of millions to states to help pay for it, and it's purely to get kids back into school for the remainder of the school year. Again, the commissioner alluded to being able to help support schools into the end of the school year with funds, but he didn't specify what those funds would be.
All right. Well, hopefully we can be creative in uses of these funds that might allow us to either, as we approach town meetings, reduce assessments. If we can use this for something else and free up some money to carry forward, et cetera, et cetera. We want to do what we can. So
you can also just, and I forgot to add this, these funds will go through there. We can use them through 2024.
Okay, well, good. All right.
Right. I know. Yeah. It's just, it gives us some flexibility with it. Districts were worried they would have to spend all of their money by a certain time, which is what happened with one of our grants early on. We had to spend it by December, and it was just kind of a nightmare. So they've now extended these years down the road.
Can I ask another question? Sorry, it just occurred to me. I'm trying to think of how to word this, but I know, this has to be used for specific costs. So I'm thinking of things, for example, I know like HVAC and PPE, those are very obvious in tech, like physical things. Is it something that could also be used if we needed to account for special things that might come up, such as extra transportation costs, for example, that's kind of harder to characterize, but I know impacted our budget a lot this year?
Yeah, I think we might be able to do that. It's interesting. It's not like Title I in the same way, the supplant versus supplement model. They're being very flexible with it. It might be something, because I can see school districts like Revere and other places that they're going to be getting an awful lot of money, putting money toward after school buses. to help pay for those for an after-school program and stuff. So I don't know whether or not, we can use it to fill budget gaps in the same way, but we can probably use it to help deal with some issues like, oh, we want to pay for some technology out of this. Well, that can be an offset to the instructional support and supply line.
I certainly wouldn't advocate for necessarily filling budget gaps. I was just asking that more because that's not sustainable. But the hypothetical question, I guess, just if there's some other wave of this we don't know about, and I don't know. It's unpredictable. I was really just curious about the limits or not. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. So do we want to move on to the E&D policy?
Alrighty, thanks, Ken. So I had included, Ken and I had a discussion about a couple weeks ago about a potential meeting before the school committee meeting, and just didn't work out. But I thought it'd be a good idea to have a discussion, just a very, very brief update on the E&D policy. And again, we've talked a great deal about this relative to the 22 budget, and frankly, thereafter. I don't know if this group has seen the policies. I thought it'd be good at this point to put it up on the screen and just present to the group. So a couple of highlights that I wanted to point out here is by October 31st. We're to submit to DOR our application for E&D. The past couple of years, I mean, this year, and we have in our contract with our auditors that they're responsible for doing this, and we assist them, we provide them with the data. I think that's something that we may have to look at down the road, because we didn't get the information from our auditors until October 31st, and then we need time to go through, and we need time to look at their numbers and make sure that their numbers jive with our numbers, and so on and so forth. And what I have found is that DOR, they're working very diligently to certify free cash for municipalities, so that they can get that information, so they can set the tax rate. Typically, even if ours was there, it probably wouldn't even be touched until sometime in November. And again, we did get ours in a couple weeks later. Our rep began to look at it, I think in early December, and we had it all wrapped up in a couple of weeks. And as you know, it was certified on December 31st. So maybe just something to consider down the road in a future meeting. Maybe that October 31st date gets pushed out maybe a month. Just a thought. Just a thought there. Then secondly, under B, again, the value, and again, as you know, when we have our E&D certified, there's a line down the bottom, and DOI says you can't exceed 5% of your current year's budget. So this year, that number based upon a budget for 21 was 5.1 million. The policy here speaks for our E&D to be nothing below the 1%. So certainly 1.4, we're certainly there. I mean, 1% of 102 million is just over a million 21,000. But in past years, as you probably know, that number has been lower. Has been lower, and certainly as we go forward into 22, and we've had discussions too about, so if we do this and we do this, where does that potentially leave us? And I'm incredibly sensitive to where we might land at the end of 21. That's for sure. So as again, at the end of December, when 20 was certified, it was 1.4 million. And then I guess just another point is, and we exercised this a couple years ago when we were working on the turf project at the high school, we put it out to the towns that we were looking to tap into the E&D of approximately $250,000 to fund that capital project. And actually, there's two things there I'd just like to speak to just real quickly. Number one is just the fact that we put it out to the towns and, give them 45 days to respond. And as you all know, there was no contesting the request. But we also learned at that time, and Ken mentioned this briefly at a previous meeting, is that the value for such capital projects, again, per the regional agreement, it's $250,000, and that maybe administration may want to consider increasing that value to Y with the discussions about the new regional agreement. I haven't had a chance to talk to Daryl about that, but certainly I think it's a great point of discussion and something that we should look at as that other committee continues its work and maybe increasing that value from 250. I'll just give you a number to 350, for example, in the future. So just a quick overview of E&D. Be happy to answer any questions or thoughts about that. And again, I'm not sure if folks saw it before in the past, but just put it out there.
I mean, the 1% is, has recommended language, so it's ideal. A lot of the other parts of it are actually law or in the regional agreement, as you say, right? So it's not like we can really change some of the legal parts about the 5%. And,
oh, right. Yes, that's law, right? And again, when we get a certification sheet down the bottom, 5% of the 102 was the 5.1. We weren't there. we were not there.
So I guess the question I have to you all is, do you feel that the change in the date for submission is pressing enough to make a change to the policy? That's something you'd like to see.
And Ken, if I just to that, prior to about 2 years ago, October 31st was the deadline for the end of the year report. DESE has changed that. They've pushed it up to September 30 now. And the reason for October 31st is that 60 days to close out federal grants. So if a federal grant, ended on August 30, you had 60 days to wrap that up. And that's why they would have pushed out the EOR to October 31st. But again, now EOR is September 30, so this does fall in line. It's just been my experience that we would, our application, if you will, would be looked at probably sometime in November, given the need to respond to municipalities. So just a thought.
So is that yes or no? Does administration feel that it's sufficiently urgent that we want to change the policy now, or do we want to?
I'd love to see it pushed out a month, but that's just I'm one person.
Okay. So what questions do the rest of the subcommittee have?
I would wonder if I was noting the policy actually hasn't been changed since 2014, according to this. So that's quite a while. So it may make sense if the DESE regulations on which it might have been based have been changed. I wonder. I'm trying to think. I mean, to me, it makes sense, and obviously, but I also wonder: is it a problem if we were to amend it this year for our contract with our auditors? Would they have a problem with that since it's, or does their contract start again in June or July?
So the contract, they'd be entering the final year come July.
July.
The problem is that I mean, actually last year they didn't get the information to us until the middle of November.
Right.
and we got to look at it, and we got to ensure that what they're giving us is correct. And there were some hiccups. They had some different data, believe it or not. And this year, we got it we get it on October 31st. So that if it's due October 31st, and we're getting it from them on October 31st.
Could they do it sooner if we asked? If they're already not meeting the October deadline, is it something with the process or something with where we fall in their prioritization, or is it just that they're not able to complete it for some outside reason? I guess that's what I'm trying to.
It's a great question, Malaya. I think it's probably a combination of all that. I mean, certainly, I think moving forward, we could put something into a future contract that, they would have to have that information in, to the district by, say, September 30. If this October 31 date does hold, give us a month to put it together. Because, again, we're still working on EOR as well at that same time.
I guess my other thought would be if we do, I'm not saying if we should or not, I think it makes sense to be consistent. And if it was based on a DESI deadline that's changed, it makes sense to change it. But then I also wonder if it is also, if we were to pursue that, if it is more consistent to use something that refers to that date and say, for example, a month prior to the EOR deadline, so we don't have to revise it every time that's changed, or whatever we think would be useful.
Yeah, I would propose process-wise that administration make suggested edits, and they can share it, I guess, with me and with council, and then bring it back to our next business and finance meeting, and we can, bring it to the committee with a recommendation. I think sometimes it doesn't really work to, edit policies on the floor and wordsmithy. So maybe if you can make your recommendation changes and share it again with Joe Bartulis and I, and then we'll bring it to the full committee. One other suggestion, that if you're going to change it, you might as well make it around 100 instead of 80 as your examples, right? Since it makes it a little bit more relevant to where we are right now. It's not super material. Does anyone from the subcommittee object to that, or does administration object to that as a path forward?
No objections here, Ken.
All right, so should we move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the review of the transportation stabilization accounts? Of course, we have one, so some of that information is a little moot because we've already taken that vote, right?
It is, again, and not knowing if the committee has seen this in the past, so I just wanted to throw it up there. And again, I think again, something that Ken and I had talked about a week or two ago, that looking at policies and how they may impact our decisions, I think is very, very helpful. Just a little bit after the fact. Again, some highlights here, and again, we have a policy. We have an account that was created several years ago. The committee made a transfer, as you all know, last June 30 for this year, $150,000, and actually we spent that just the other day in the warrant that you approved. Get it off the books, because as you read this here, again, that has to be used the following year, which would have been this year. Otherwise, it falls to the bottom line. We made our first payments to AA Transportation, going back to January 19th. So those dollars have been expended. And just in terms of the mechanics, as you'll see later on, this doesn't impact the revenue side of things, but when we do that transfer, and it's my recommendation that we get it done in May or even late April. The sooner the better. Certainly, we built the 22 budget and the assessments using that $1 million. That's considered just in terms of the accounting as an expense. So you'll see it in my projections as an expense for next year. Any questions? Are we good to go with that? All right.
I mean, I think it's a good. I think it's a good. Dan, would you mind muting for a second?
I'm sorry.
I think it's okay. It's okay. I just keep hearing myself in your computer. I think it's a good policy to have and a good practice for this year. I think we just want to be politically cognizant moving forward that, if we're putting a lot of money every year into transfer stabilization, the towns can be asking, was our assessment right in the first place? I think, places like circuit breaker and school choice make sense to use as carry forward. I think this, from my perspective, this should be not a routine thing that we're taking large balances into this account, right? Rather than, I know there was special circumstances this year and probably next. That's just, I don't know, that's just my 2 cents. But does anybody else have things to say about the transportation stabilization?
And Ken, your point is taken. This year there was a special circumstance. Again, the yellow buses didn't run until the middle of January. And even last year, the yellow buses stopped running the middle of March. So there was a savings. Moving forward into 22, I certainly don't see that type of savings come next year. And knock on wood, that we'll be back to some sense of normalcy come next year. And maybe at the end of the day, a year from now, we're looking at maybe 100,000 or even something less than that to be transferred in. But again, this is very helpful for us for next year, and it does help the towns. But I don't think it's going to be there. It won't be there moving forward. Not that value of cash.
Right, which is just a little bit more. We'll have to raise the assessment next year, so we'll have to keep that in mind as y'all budget. Basing some of this year's budget off of one-time monies. Do we want to move on to the next item on the agenda? So, grand item number 3, right, which has a number of sub items under it, is update on fiscal year 21 budget. So. If we can just, each of these checkpoints, maybe Dan, you could start us off by giving us the big picture of, okay, what is our goal that we're doing when we go through these data, right? So what are we hoping to learn and share, and what are you looking for feedback on?
Sure.
And then you can give us some of the details.
All right, great. So thank you. So I've highlighted a couple of grants that I thought were important to bring to your attention. And the first grant, again, here is the school reopening grant. And as you can see there, in the report that I gave you, there was an unencumbered balance of $120,000 and change. That money is gone. I met with Deputy Superintendent Burlow today, and we've identified a number of expenditures in the general fund. And again, when we get to that, you'll see what I'm talking about. We've got that undesignated appropriation where we're just charging off all COVID-related charges there. So we'll be backing out of the general fund approximately 120,000 and change into this grant, and those dollars will be fully expended. We'll be doing journal entries to get that off the books. So I'm happy to answer any questions about that, but that's something we'll get done in the next couple of days. And again, Deputy Burlow and I met late this afternoon to identify those costs. The second grant that I just wanted to speak to bring to your attention again is the FY21 240 grant, and just in terms of how we classify these grants, the first 3 or 4 digits represent the grant. So the 240 is the fund code, and then 21 obviously would be fiscal year 21. There is a nominal, excuse me, there is a nominal balance in this grant, and it's actually there's 2 lines that I have need to make some adjustments on. Number 1 is under contracted services. So what we'll be doing is we'll be making adjustments either between the general fund, because there was a balance there as well, or in circuit breaker into this grant, and we will expend the $31,453.70 that is there. Secondly, a few lines down, as you can see there, in that grant, there's an unencumbered balance of almost 49,549, 489 and change. That is unencumbered, and yet in the general fund, in the detail, in the line item detail, that line is over expended by almost $100,000. So I am working with Director Smith, and we'll be making adjustments between the general fund and the 240 grant to expend, not fully expend that 49 and change, but to spend it down considerably, and in doing so reduce the shortfall in the line in the general fund. The next one is the FY20 262 grant, and I guess let me just get to the grant itself. That's helpful. Is that there was an over expenditure in that grant, and that has since been corrected. We corrected that today. We're almost there. Here we go. As you can see, there was an over expenditure of almost 45,000, where there was a speech therapist who was being charged to the wrong grant. So the charges and the encumbrances have been corrected, and we've got that person charged to the FY21 grant. So that has been corrected. And then the other grant that I want to bring to your attention, given the balance, is the FY21 the 305 grant, the Title I grant. And as you can see here, in the 21 grant, there's an unencumbered balance of almost 193,000 in change. And again, the payroll line here has an unencumbered balance of approximately 121,000. That line is used to pay tutors, and these tutors, the hours that they work per week fluctuate, predicated upon the need. So basically that's the reason why that is unencumbered. This grant is a multi-year grant, and I think I've spoken about this in the past, where we can bring these dollars forward if need be into FY22. Certainly there will be further expenditures in this line. I mean, one thing that in speaking with one of my staff about this, and I need to have a conversation with the grants manager about this, is that I'd like them to look at these providers, the staff, these tutors who are providing these services, and if nothing else, lowball the estimate of services that they're providing to our students, so that we can encumber the money accordingly. And I'm not saying that we encumber the full 121,000. We'll probably bring a portion of that forward into 22, but certainly looking at the payments to date for this fiscal year, and perhaps encumber the balance so that we can reduce that available budget moving forward. And then the last one that I wanted to bring to your attention is, and again, this is COVID related. I don't believe I mentioned this at our last meeting, but it's this last grant here, and this is from the DESE, and this was just last month. And I apologize if I didn't speak to the committee about this last month, but this was a portion of COVID money as well that really doesn't have any restrictions. And every district across the Commonwealth did receive a sum of money. In our case here, it's $10,000, and I need to confirm the ending date, but I believe I'll stand corrected that we'll need to spend these down by the end of June 30th. 2021, and that certainly can assist Director Barton and looking at some of the costs that right now she's assumed in her revolving account. Just a quick overview. Be happy to answer any questions.
All right, so kind of just I appreciate that information and being able to look at some of the balances that might have been negative that we saw in the information you shared us and getting an explanation. The IDEA is a huge grant, right? So it's not a huge amount percent we're talking about out of this grant. And so to kind of get back to my question at the beginning, aside from doing our due diligence to look at these numbers and account for balances and downstream transfers, is there any input you want from the committee having given us this information? So what policy questions do you think we should be having from the information that we're talking about here? Is there input that you want from us that could help your either Daryl or Dan's path forward?
So I guess what comes to mind, Ken, and to the group is I'm wrapping up the 20 audit with our auditors. I got to, and this is probably more for audit advisory, but certainly it applies to this group as well. And I think if you recall, like my first year here, I think it was, the district received a finding because there was no federal grants manual, and that has since been corrected, and we have this book now, and it's all good. One of the findings that I'm challenging with my audit is just given the pandemic is that I didn't update the thresholds. They changed on the federal side last year, and my argument to them was, guys, you got to cut me some slack. But I'm just thinking policies. I mean that manual, Ken, that's the Bible. That's and I think I'd like to do like a 50,000-foot overview at a future meeting, because that Bible directs how we spend these federal grants. It does, and maybe early next year or later this year we can dedicate a half hour to that federal grants, because there are implications if we don't adhere to dot our I's and cross our T's relative to that document. So it's not really answering your question about a Bible, but it is, I think, bringing to this group's attention the importance of that book and how it pertains to what we're doing here, because the consequences are, we could get a mulligan, my term, finding from the auditors relative to that. But I think, Ken, I will have to look at our policies actually and see if our policies are aligned with the federal grant expenditures, and I'm not so sure that they are. I'm not so sure that they are. So that's a homework assignment for me that I will need to bring to this group at a later date for sure.
Okay, so I hear that we'll have a book review at some point going forward, right? That may have school committee input policy. I mean, there's oversight, right, which we're doing, which is good, and we should do on a routine basis. I just want to make sure that I'm pulling out any pieces that that you want input on. But the way we spend our IDEA money is pretty standard from year to year, right?
It is,
so
Ken.
But
I think the takeaway from that is that the thresholds for federal procurement are very different than the thresholds for, say, procurement here in Massachusetts. They're lower. They're lower, and I don't think our auditors have really drilled down into that. They're just looking to say, okay, where's the book? Number one, here's my book. Okay, let's see your thresholds, and they haven't drilled down to purchase orders, for example, to say, okay, this is aligned with that threshold there. At least not yet. That's probably next year's audit for sure.
People on the committee have things they want to talk about here.
So I just a question, just to clarify, to make sure that understanding with these. So I guess part of it is that, like, when you talk grants broadly, there's kind of a connotation with grants of them being one-time events. So you get one grant and then it's done. But at least with a couple of these, there's they are and they aren't, because I mean, it's correct that we get the Title I money every year. It's like a grant, but is that correct that like some of these we're getting every year?
Yes, it is. Title I's a great example. The 240 is another great example. The 180 and the 140 as well. Those are pretty regular grants. The first couple of grants that are up there, and if I can just go for a second to this document here, the school reopening grant. That's basically those are federal stimulus dollars. Those are gone. Those are gone. ESSER, again, we're into ESSER 3, but once the pandemic is behind us and in the rearview mirror, that money will be gone. And then the early education, that's a fairly regular grant, the 262 grant. The numbers vary. I think it was my first year here, and I'll stand corrected. Daryl certainly would know, but my first year here, I think you took an almost $200,000 hit in your Title I grant that year. I think the previous year was like 400,000 plus, and so that would have been, I think, FY19, and it went from 400,000 to 200,000 in 1 year. Boom, just like that. So Kyle, to your question, yes, they are entitled. They are entitlement grants, and we see them every year. I think where we need to be careful is the allocation, especially with the Title I grant, as evidenced by what happened about 3 years ago. Is that fair to say, Daryl? It was about 3 years ago.
Yeah, and it was about $200,000.
Ouch.
And as a result, we were just able to provide less services. I mean, that's linked to income, right? So for low-income students, so we unfortunately had to make cuts to account for that, as my memory of what happened there, because there's particular positions that are linked to those grant funds, because they're soft money, as we would call it in the higher ed world, right?
Yes.
But the 240 is pretty, that survived the DeVos administration. So I feel like that's a pretty standard thing year over year. It's a huge part of our budget, though. I mean, it's if that was to disappear, that would be a problem.
It would, Ken, and again, it's been my experience, both here and in other districts, that your allocation, we'll just use Wachusett as an example, that we don't see a very large increase year to year. In mid-year, we did receive recently notification that we received some additional funds. I think it was like $6,000 or $7,000 that were to be amended into the grant. But of a $1.6 million grant this year, 1.5 of that is allocated to contracted services. Essentially, tuitions are contracted services, primarily tuitions, and again, that's huge because again, when we look at the bigger picture in terms of tuitions, again, just using Christine's estimated numbers, the bottom line with sped tuitions, it's not what's in the general fund. It's the 7.2, and of that 7.2, we got 1.5 over here in the 240 grant. We've got 2.5 over in next year's circuit breaker. We've got 1.5 in the carry forward, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that is a big number. That 1.5 is a big number, and if that grant were to be reduced, Christine would have to look long and hard as, okay, what other services within that grant could she either reallocate or so that that big number in tuitions doesn't get reduced significantly. We can't go from 1.5, 1.4 to say $1 million. That would be significant. That would hurt.
So, other questions under federal grants? All right. Is there anything to say about regional transportation in your notes? It seems as though you haven't received its initial disbursement. Is there anything to update us on beyond that?
There is. And Daryl, I owe you an apology. I got a note, and I think I sent you a note very late today, but we haven't received it yet. But it's in the queue for next week. I believe it's 800. Hold on one second. I had it here. Give me 1 second. I apologize. I want to say it's 860,000. Here it is. There we go. The estimated payment. We haven't seen it yet. It's in the queue. It's 872,149. 872,149. I'll give Jim Dunbar a heads up to look for that late next week. So that our estimated receipts this year, if we just take that number and multiply it out, is 1.7. Now, I do have a call to Jay Sullivan because I just need to confirm with him that he has made that second adjustment. That, if you recall, when I first started, I walked into that issue with Eeyore. The 235, and they made an adjustment the first year. They forgot to make the adjustment last year. He and I have had several conversations about this. I've sent him a couple of notes. I've said, just remember that when you do finalize your numbers, that please take off the top, the 135 or 133, so that we're good. So I just want to confirm with him that he has indeed taken the, I think it's 133 and change, off that 872 and change. Again, as you'll see when we get into the revenue projections for 21, I've used that lower number now. I used the 1.6 because that's a number from the 22 cherry sheet, and I used that number in my report last month. And I've also used that number moving forward. Obviously, we're not going to hit the 2.4 that's on the cherry sheet. That's just not going to happen. This number does not reflect the amendment, for the EOR that's out there. So I should know next week. Hopefully, we'll see the ACH transfer into our account of the 872,149, and also that 872 does reflect the second and final adjustment of 133,000, and that's hot off the presses today.
So if I'm hearing two things, just to see if I'm hearing them right. If indeed there was 130 reduced from this payment, which is, I guess, we want because it gets it finally over with, then math would tell me that maybe we'd be expecting closer to $1 million for the second disbursement because it would have 135,000 more. Am I misinterpreting that? So it's more like 1.8 than 1.6? Okay, Dan, now you are muted.
Yeah. Yep, you're right. Assuming that is the case, I want to confirm that with him. So we would be closer to $1 million this one year, and so we'd be under our target by about 400,000. Actually, a little bit less than that, depending upon what the value is in the EOR amendments. So.
And then we're still waiting on the EOR to see how that affects.
Yes. Yep.
Do members of the subcommittee have questions about regional transportation, or Daryl, do you have anything to add?
No, I'm all set, Ken.
And again, our cherry sheet for next year is based on this year, but it's also based on the reimbursement rate, right? Which in the governor's budget was pretty low. So hopefully the House and/or Senate will. I know it's not their priority right now, but our legislators are pretty good at fighting for us. So hopefully that percentage will go up a little bit. But we're not counting on it. I know. But if it did, that would be good, again, as a way to lower the transportation assessment for the towns for next year, if we find out about that before town meetings. So the next item on the agenda is revolving accounts. We have athletics, school lunch, circuit breaker, and school choice. So we've had conversations about athletics and school lunch each of our past couple of meetings, right? And I know that there are some small changes here and there about revenues changing, but why don't we see if we can hit the highlights of what's different from the conversations we've had the past two meetings, and what feedback you'd want from us in terms of thinking about these things.
So Ken, and to the committee, there isn't really a significant difference with athletics. Again, they're still projecting out a shortfall. But one thing that the high school made me aware of the other day is they still have not finalized their revenues, their user fees for this year. So the deficit may not be as as significant as we think it is. My game plan, if it's 30,000 or 40,000, again, similar to last year, is to make an adjustment between the general fund and the athletic revolving to cover that deficit. School lunch at a 50,000 foot level. Again, Margaret has revised her numbers. She couldn't be here this evening, but the takeaway that, let me just get there for you. Do you see that okay, by the way?
Now we do.
So the takeaway.
Now we don't.
Okay, I'm sorry. I got to put it back. So the takeaway from here is that she has revised her shortfall, and you can see that it's approximately $70,000. But what I'd like to share with you is that when she was projecting out her labor costs, she projected out that she was going to backfill her 7 vacancies. So those positions are in that. If you can see it there, that almost $650,000. 649,975. So in the event that she's not able to backfill those 7 positions, then she hasn't had much luck. That will certainly reduce the shortfall in the the revenue shortfall here. And again, she's revised her expenditures based upon the return to school on April 5th. I've accounted for this shortfall in the general fund, and again, I'll speak to that when we get there. I've inflated her shortfall by approximately $30,000 again to have a bigger number. She will have a better sense certainly the next couple of weeks as students get back into the buildings in terms of where she's at. But if you recall from our previous meeting a month ago, she was projecting a shortfall, I believe it's approximately $112,000. So there's still a shortfall there, but and it's not insignificant. $70,000 is not insignificant, but it's not as great as it was before, and we're accounting for that in the general fund.
People from the subcommittee have questions about school lunch or athletics.
My question is not directly about finances, but a general one. If she's having trouble filling those positions, is there a plan B if all the students return? Because I recall her saying that we needed them in order to provide meal service to all of our students. So I don't even know where that goes, but I don't know what we do with that.
Yeah, Malaya, that's a great question. I'll need to reach out to her and look at what her plan is. I mean, I know one thing that she has talked to me about is that she's only one person, but that she would have to roll up her sleeves wherever that's necessary. One thing that she and I have talked about for Plan B is, as you know, Becker College is slated to close, by the end of June. At least that's what they're saying now. I had suggested that we do some outreach to their folks who work in the cafeterias in both campuses to see if they'd be interested and again, not knowing where they're at, these people are in terms of their compensation. But it's worth the effort to reach out to see, hey, we've got an opportunity for you in a school setting if you're interested. So I had to circle back with her to see if that's happened. That was a suggestion I made to her about a week or so ago.
All right. I was just curious. I mean, I didn't know if it would impact being able to provide lunch or, which has other financial impacts. So I appreciate that.
I'll put on the hat of a member who's not here because I can hear in their voice asking this question. So our people work extremely hard, but if we find at the end of the year we're able to provide the services we need to provide with 7 fewer FTEs, is there a sharpening of the pencils about procedures or process that we could do to see some savings there without asking undue amounts on people who are valued employees?
It does beg the question, Ken. It does, and I would argue that I would need to ask Margaret that question. Absolutely. And I don't want to speak for Margaret. She may say, "I really need those 7 bodies," and I get that. But it does. It certainly does. Yep.
And I mean, what question I would have, and it's kind of just more kind of a broad question, at least, that like, what has our usage of the school lunch program been like this year, with like recognizing that it's been free for families and free for students? Like, has it been any higher than normal years, or kind of? And granted, because we've had half the kids in the building, little over, but or like, have there been some schools where it's been higher, some schools where it's been lower, or just kind of curious to see if more folks have been taking advantage of it or not, and if we'll see a change once folks are in the building 5 days a week, whereas being in 2 days a week, maybe they just didn't packing lunch for a kid for 2 days out of the week is suddenly ramping it up to 5 days out of the week. Some I could easily see parents throwing in the towel. So, but it's just more of a, well, I mean, it ties into our financial line because we're reimbursed for every meal we deliver. But it's just a curiosities question in terms of like where things are tracking this year compared to previous years.
So, Kyle, I would need to look at the data for every building. I just don't have that here at my disposal. I mean, one of the concerns Margaret has is that even though every child is entitled to a free lunch, she's expressed concerns about waste, especially at the high school level, giving students a lunch as they left the high school, and then it's not cool, if you will, with all due respect, to have that lunch and the kid walks out of the building and they're walking down the sidewalk and they throw it along the side, and I can hear Margaret in my head. I can hear her saying that, or kids having a lunch on a bus as they're going home. One of her concerns with especially the younger students was giving a child a lunch as they were leaving and having that child have something on the bus and God forbid they choke on something if they were eating it. She's had a number of concerns about that. But I'd have to, have a conversation with her and look, at the data across the board.
And that's not a pressing thing. That's not a drop what you're doing, but it's just be curious to like see how things have gone with that this year.
All right, so should we move on to anything you wish to highlight from circuit breaker and school choice?
No, Ken. Again, the circuit breaker, that's this line here. You can see my cursor. That was a carry forward. We should be receiving our March disbursement probably by the end of next week. And then obviously in June. Again, Christine has sent out, is looking for a couple of students that may be placed before the end of the year, but given the time of the year, we're not going to see it won't have a huge hit to the budget, but it will have an impact upon next year's budget if they weren't projected to be out of district. The school choice, again, our balance a couple of days ago, and this is an unofficial balance because I don't believe that February was closed out yet. But we're looking at 562, 513, and 60 cents. And again, the goal is to carry forward all of this year's revenue plus the 372 and change that we brought forward from last year. So a little bit under $700,000. So this expenditure here of almost $8,800 will be backing out and into the general fund, and this encumbrance here of almost $3,600 again we'll look to back that into the general fund to free up the cash here. But again, still full steam ahead. The game plan is to carry forward those figures that we talked about for the 22 budget.
So just in case people are watching the recording, that's again for school choice for a circuit breaker. We know we have to spend the money from last year this year, so we can carry forward. We can't carry forward last year's money into next year for circuit breaker, but school choice we can. Yeah.
Right. Correct, Ken. Circuit breaker. I'm sorry. School choice. You can bring that forward from year to year, and you've got more flexibility with school choice than with circuit breaker. Circuit breakers are related to special education costs, and still the many costs associated with that, from salaries to now transportation to tuitions to supplies, materials, and I would say to Darrow early on that of all these two accounts, the school choice is the one that you really want to try and build up as best you can, because that's going to be your rainy day fund. That gives you the flexibility that if there is a hiccup, that you can tap into school choice to address something immediately.
Members of the subcommittee have any questions for the rest of the revolving accounts? Seeing none, why don't we turn our attention to 21 general fund revenues and expenditures. So what are our what do you want to direct our attention to here?
So Ken, I'd like to get into the revenue projections again. So here's the Munis. This is the Munis budget report that I show you all the time. And then again, Munis has the ability to, I take the data and I convert it to an Excel document, and then I do my projections out. So a couple changes I do want to bring to the group's attention. I shrunk it because I want you to see the notes. So we've talked about Chapter 70 was shot almost $409,000 from the original approved budget. So again, regional transportation, and again, we're almost $800,000 under our budget, and again, so how did I arrive at that 1.6 million? So again, I used the FY22 cherry figure number of $1,670,602. I estimated an additional 100,000 based upon the amendments, and again, that's an estimate. That number may not hold true for the revised total of 1.7, and then I backed out. I used 135,000 as the balance owed to get us the estimated number of 1,635,602. And we now know again that our first payment is the 872 and change. So Again, I'll revise these. Actually, what I'll do is that I'll send a separate email to the committee in the next couple of days just to update these revenues given the known information now, and hopefully in the next couple of days I'll connect with Jay Sullivan and he can confirm for me, hopefully, excuse me, that he has, excuse me, made the adjustment of the 133 or the 135,000 in regional transportation. That's number one. Number two, I want to bring this to your attention is that I've updated Medicaid receipts. That we at this point will be exceeding benchmark by almost $100,000, $95,462. And the reason for that is that we did receive just this week the final data on our FY20 cost report, and the estimated payment on that we'll get in June. And again, during the year, we receive quarterly payments, direct service claims and admin claims. And in June, we receive those payments as well, direct service claims and admin claims. But the big number in June is the cost report. What's that going to generate? And we have that number. I actually signed off on it yesterday or the day before, and we sent it off to Mass Health for certification. So we're looking to pick up again an additional almost $100,000, and that is that's the reason why when we were looking at the 22 figure again, and this was all kind of hot off the press data, so to speak. We didn't have this data 3 weeks ago. We didn't. That I felt in working with our Medicaid coordinator, Susan Soper, that we could bump up the estimated receipts for 22, because in 22 we're going to receive reimbursement, having reported the payment for the home to school this past February, and hopefully, knock on wood, the payment to Vanpool, the readiness payment from last year, and those numbers haven't been factored into any of our data that we supply to UMass as part of the cost report. And as you know, the payment to AA, it was an infusion of almost $833,000, $832 and change. That was not even part of the FY20 cost report. So that's going to help us with cash for next year. So that's another number that we adjusted. Interest kept it the same. Again, where I'm projecting about 25,000 if we hit that benchmark. Miscellaneous, I did bump that up, and actually that number I believe is going to be revised even further to the good. And the reason for that is because I signed off on as I had written. I signed off on invoices to a number of districts, again, whose students that we transport through our vendor to Devro through January, and those invoices went out just recently. Of just shy of $100,000. It was 85,000 and change through February. We still have March, April, May, and a part of June to go to invoice those districts. So I don't believe that we're going to hit the benchmark of 200,000. So there will be a shortfall in terms of the original benchmark, but I believe that we will certainly hit and exceed the revised benchmark of $100,000.
All right.
Yes,
So,
go ahead, Ken.
So, does anybody have any questions at this point from the subcommittee?
I have a clarifying one, which I should know, but just when you were talking, it's been a long day. Can you explain, because when you were talking about Medicaid, you started talking about transportation. Can you explain how that was factored in? Because I said it's just been a long day. I'm sure I was just not thinking.
So Malay, when we submitted our data as part of the 20 cost reports, because our yellow buses hadn't started running until the middle of January, we could not have reported that data again. Medicaid receipts are similar to circuit breaker, where the reimbursements follows after the fact. Number two, again, the the readiness payments that was made to AA Transportation from FY20, that was made about a month or so ago, that 833,000 or 832 and change. I'm just rounding it up. That was not part of the data for that reports, and again, that's submitted on a quarterly basis. So that number alone, that 833,000, was excluded from this year's data, and we will see that reimbursement either next September 30, or December 30 of next year. And still, what's not factored into this equation, which is why I believe that this number for this year is good, but for next year I think would be better, is that we still have yet to make the readiness payment for Vanpool, and we're still in negotiations, but just the fact that payment hasn't been made, and it'll be of significance, I guess is all I can say without breaching the process. It'll be of significance. So that number has yet to be factored into any of our data for FY20, or for that matter FY21. Hopefully that'll happen before June 30, and we'll see that reimbursement probably next December at the earliest. At the earliest.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
You don't need to apologize. It's all good.
All right, great. So, year over year, Medicare, is a moving target, right? So I trust you to be conservative, because it's your nature about what we project forward for revenues this year, next year, just because we had more revenues than we expected this year. So we definitely don't have to press you to be conservative. I'm confident in that. So that's good.
No, and the other thing too, Ken, is again with Medicaid and the pandemic, is that typically you'd have 90 days to file the direct service claims. Again, kind of an odd offshoot of the pandemic is that the 90 days is out the window, and we have up to last July to file those direct service claims. Director Smith, along with Medicaid Coordinator Soper, they've been great working with staff, and Sue Soper sent out a communication to some of our clinicians the past couple of weeks, and just last week, when we did the year-to-year comparisons a year ago, at the same time, our direct certs that were submitted were like $1,000. And the direct certs from a week ago were $9,000. So the hard work of Christine, Director Smith, and also Susan Soper, and that it is paying off, and frankly to the committee. I think it was this committee, I think it was Ken actually, if I may, who said you need to look, I don't want to speak for you, Ken, but you need to look at hiring a Medicaid coordinator, and we ran with that, and we were just very lucky that Susan Soper, they were able to bring her on board from UMass, and she's done yeoman's work in writing that ship, for sure.
Well, you get what you pay for. So what do we want to move on in this then, Dan?
So here's your Munis budget report. Again, ran this a couple of days ago. So let's get into the nitty gritty. So again, in the undesignated, let me just blow that up for you here. You know, we've spent a little bit under $294,000. There is a shortfall there of again 294. I'm going to be taking 120,000 out of that, so it's going to reduce that shortfall by the 120. Deputy Superintendent Burlow is also working on his ESSER2 grant application, and we spoke about that today as well. And unofficially, but we're looking to shift either from this 293 or down here in operations and maintenance, approximately $150,000 into that grant, and that's due next week. So this here shows a projected balance of $368,676.84. That number, again, right away, we're going to reduce it by 120,000. That's going to be backfilled into the SRG grant, number one, and then approximately 150,000 into the ESSER2 grant to reduce that shortfall, which means that our bottom line is always going to go up based upon that activity. Here in salaries, again, we have an unencumbered balance of almost 3.3 million, $3,284,663. You know, long day, and 20 cents. As you saw a moment ago, Director Barton was projecting a shortfall in school lunch of approximately $70,000. As I said then, I projected, I bumped up that shortfall to $100,000. So that number, that number here certainly can be and likely will be reduced. Day-to-day subs, this is the balance that's remaining in that line, and I'm assuming that we're going to spend that down. Our spring coaches, that's a pretty solid number for the spring coach. It just has not been encumbered yet, but it will be encumbered. Transfer and benefits, again, as I had spoken before, we built the 21 budget on the premise that that we would use school choice money to offset, and we haven't. We've held on to school choice money, so that's why there's a shortfall there. We did make some adjustments. We did reduce a purchase order with health insurance. We picked up approximately $82,000, so the shortfall there got reduced, and we're looking more to drill down on that. Again, on the premise that we're going to hold on to all of our school choice money going into FY22. There's still some vacancies. I've got a placeholder there for vacancies of approximately $200,000, long-term subs. Again, that's the balance that's in the line, and we'll look to adjust that accordingly. There's still several groups, as you know, that are outstanding with contracts, so there's a placeholder there for that. The ECC adjustments, we'll be looking to move one person from that revolving account because the revenues will not sustain that salary for the year. So we're going to move that the balance of that salary into the general fund. Again, we've talked about other operating costs. There's a shortfall there, just given the final state number. We'll be doing a transfer down there. And there's a nominal shortfall in pupil services now that we're looking to cover. So all said and done, I'm projecting out 1.7 million in additional expenditures with a projected balance in salaries of just under 1.6, 1,577,888. Again, this is the shortfall in benefits, again, because we're holding on to our school choice. That's why you see that shortfall there. We'll do a transfer down and negate that. Instructional support, we're looking to essentially spend down that, and a big part of that 807,000 is Deputy Superintendent Burlow's textbooks, and he's ready to submit requisitions and spend that down. Looking at last year's balance, we had about 100,000, so I'm looking at projecting about 148,000. Lost my train of thought there. Operations and maintenance, again, we did reduce purchase orders for electricity. We picked up a little bit over 223,000. We're still looking to drill down on the fuel, natural gas and oil, so looking to pick up some cash there. I'm projecting an expenditure of $100,000, essentially PPE to get us ready for the start of 22. The pupil service, again, a shortfall there that will correct. Sped tuitions, again, looking to make an adjustment of $100,000 between either the 240 grant or a circuit breaker. Other operating costs, again, this is the end result of the final state budget and the approved Wachusett budget. And based upon the monthly assessments, I feel that 1.5 is a good number. Again, our original number, as you saw, was 1.1. And based upon the activity to date, I'm looking at the 1.5. Transportation, again, as I said earlier, the 1.8, we're looking, when you vote the transfer, that's in essence treated as an expense. So I need to report that on EOR as an expense. And the 800,000, again, that's not the actual number in terms of a readiness payment, but I want to show that there. It won't be that number, and then our debt number is what it is. So at the end of the day, I was looking at expenditures of 100 million plus, and if I can just go back to the revenues for a second. We were looking at just under $1 million as an ending balance. And to use my infamous term, that's a fluid number. And again, as I said, I'm accounting for some charges in school lunch that may be less. And there is still some drilling down to do in operations and maintenance relative to fuel and some other lines as well.
So it strikes me that it feels like a minimum to me, right? That the $950,000 left, because it feels like, if the EOR goes through, you may get more for regional transportation, and if the 135 is off of that 872, you might get another 135 there. So while everything's fluid, the 950 to me feels like the baseline, right, of where we are. So, and we put 750, it was the end number, into E&D. Is that, that's, we used 750 of this year's E&D for next year's budget, right?
Yes, we did. Yep. We used a lower number. Yep.
So if you had to guess, and I'm going to guess, I'm not going to make you guess, but I'm going to say the E&D next year will come in at a minimum of 1.6, right?
Do you mean, Ken, do you mean 1.6 for Dan's end of the year this year coming up?
No, for what we have left in E&D. So we spend 750 in certified E&D for next year, right? Which leaves us $650,000 in money that will go towards next year's E&D. And then if we have $1 million left over from this year, give or take, right? We would anticipate the certified E&D, big ballpark. I'm not even going to make Dan say yes or no. I feel like that would have us be around 1.6, 1.7 for certified E&D next year, which is well covering our 1% policy we talked about earlier tonight. I'm not saying it's a good or bad thing. I'm just saying, yeah.
And I appreciate, Ken, the fact that you're not looking to pin me down there, because I don't think I would want to take that offer. But the other thing too, Ken, and to the committee, and again, Kyle's on legal, so Kyle, you can give me the virtual kick in the shins if you'd like. We still have the issue with Vanpool and that clock is ticking. I mean, I can say this publicly. We have until June 30. Otherwise, that money, I close that out. That falls to the bottom line. It just does. I got no choice with that matter, and I've reported that I believe to legal, and I believe I've told this committee as well that issue has to get resolved, and if not, so that number could go up, Ken. that number could go up if that doesn't get resolved. But then that poses a problem because how are we going to pay when that does get resolved? That's a whole different issue. We're not going down that road right now.
Yeah, and Ken, also the other part of this is that we have. You just reminded me of that, Dan. The money that fell to the bottom line this year for transportation, the whatever it was, how much was it? $400,000. That gets thrown into the 1.4 million of the E&D that we have. So it's actually it's actually higher than the 1.4, right, Dan?
Yep. So again, with the payment to AA, in essence, 350,000 has fallen to the bottom line for 21. So as I've said, before we even tackle 21, that carry forward from 20 impacts our 21 E&D certification. That's already hit there. Secondly, and I don't think I've reported this, but I have told my staff, there are still some encumbrances in FY20. It's not huge money, but it's still several $1,000s. It's a little bit over $10,000. I'm closing it out, so let's just call it $10,000. It's a little bit more than that. We're closing it out. It's almost April 1st for all intents and purposes. Those purchase orders are brought forward, with the intent that I don't have it here in front of me. Those products and those services would have been received in, July or August for this year. We're into April. So that's going to hit our bottom line again. So now let's just call it, we're now at $360,000 once those get closed out. And then, as we've talked about, is the whole van pool issue there, and what may come out of that. And again, just being respectful of the process.
I am one person. I am not the committee. As one person, I would strongly encourage district administration to spend ahead some of this money, so that we don't wind up with, like, potentially, again, I'm not putting this number in your head, Dan, don't have a heart attack here, but I don't want to see us getting like $2.2 certified $million in E&D next year. Like, I really strongly encourage us to be, filling the oil tanks, prepaying tuitions, whatever we can do to make sure that doesn't happen. Because the towns are going to look at that and be like, what the heck, right? Especially towns that have no free cash.
So, Ken, Daryl and I, we've talked about this. Excuse me. We have a game plan. Director Burlow is ready to rock and roll. And the reason why we were hesitant is that we didn't know, up until, frankly, today. I haven't seen it yet, but again, the regional transportation reimbursement, we weren't sure where that was going to be. We have a game plan. Daryl and I, we talked about May 1st. I think talking to Bob today, late Daryl, we're looking to push that up. We're looking to push that up. That's number one. Ken, to your point, again, on the tuitions, for example, I only projected a $100,000 expenditure between now and the rest of the year. I mean, we can certainly zero that out, without question. We can zero that out, and that will help us for the Circuit Breaker 21 carry forward. So, and yes, PPE, in the 22 budget, there's 200,000 in operations and maintenance in that appropriation. If we can get a jump start on that, maybe, I can come back to this group here and say, I want to take that 200,000 in operations and maintenance in the 22 budget, and I want to put it into salaries and budget technically hasn't been officially approved yet by the town. So, and I need to just check on that, actually. Though the committee has approved it, they approved the bottom line. They didn't approve each appropriation. But again, if we do that, I'll bring it to you for your discussion and so forth. So point well taken, Ken, Daryl, Bob, and I. We've talked about this week. Bob and I again today.
We have a lot of discussions on this, Ken, because again, we lived through this. I think you were here when one of my very first year, maybe even my first year as superintendent, we had quite a bit left over at the end of the year. The projections weren't, they just weren't done, I think, as closely as they could have been. And I can remember some of the towns giving us a hard time about it. So we've lived through that. So Dan's been really good about going through it with us and keeping us kind of informed in terms of what's available. And Dan's conservative by nature in terms of how this kind of plays out. And I'd rather have him like that than being overly optimistic about the funds that we have. But we're going to be able to go back through and, as you said, fill the oil tanks, buy ahead, textbooks, whatever it is we can do as well. Look at some of the things that we're holding back on this year and put that forward. So,
and I think perhaps it's fair to say that part of the reason for this, I don't know, call it surplus, or part of the reason for being able to transfer money out of the line we're transferring it out of is because we didn't hire all those positions we had budgeted for, but we planned to, right? So, going forward, of course, my whole thing about, we want to make sure we just want to base our budgets going forward that we can't do this every year because, if we have those positions actually on the books next year, that we won't have that money left over next year.
And, also great point about the positions. And we're also, like people have asked me, so why can't we put some of the positions into the new grant that's coming out? And we're not putting any bodies into the grants.
That's bad practice to have one-time money pay for recurring expenses. People in the subcommittee want
to. Just a lesson learned, Ken, and to the group. Just going back to 2008, 2010, in the ARRA funds, and District 1 then, because that was one-time money too. In the early part of the Obama administration, when the economy was in the tank, then use those dollars for one-time expenditures. Don't put bodies into those grants because you got to create a funding cliff. And knock on wood, when that happened way back when, I didn't. So I didn't have that problem. But I would, if we were going down that road, I would. I'd jump up and down till I turn purple to tell Daryl, don't do it. We can't do it. We're setting us up for a problem a year down the road, or 2 years down the road, without question.
Do subcommittee members want to have input into this part of the agenda?
So just to make sure that I had kind of heard, and to kind of build off of what Ken was saying as well. So we've got 1.4 certified in E&D. There's at least another 350K that's basically hanging out in E&D. And that, so, you add that together and we're looking at like 1.7, and then planning to take out 750 would still leave us at 1 plus whatever we add up in. So, it looks like, again, still inching around 2. And so, as Ken had said, certainly if there are things that we were planning to procure next year that we can procure this year, it would be, like I said, that to kind of be able to reduce, basically the effect would be, reducing something next year for next year's budget that we were doing this year. Like textbooks and instructional supplies, that seems like it could be one. Talking like operations and maintenance, like the fuel stuff, yeah, you can buy some of that early, but and as well as like what would tie into a grant. So like, I don't know, and facilities would have like the list of all of our like major capital improvement projects that we've got kind of slated out, because that's not a recurring thing. You've got a recurring process for that, but like, oh, we want to replace a boiler. Our next big purchase is going to be to replace a boiler at the high school. That's like, you've got a row of those, but that's not a recurring thing. There is a recurring element to your ongoing maintenance, but larger capital projects like that. It seems like operations and maintenance is another place where we could potentially start some things early. But now, of course, I don't know how realistic that would be, because when you start into the procurement process for some of those larger improvements, you've kind of got some timelines that you get pinched with that in order to get those started by June 30th. But it seems like that could be an option as well.
So one of the things, Kyle, that we've had some discussions about, very brief discussions, and again, in talking with Deputy Burlow today, is tackling ECC and the HVAC issues over there. We got to believe that, and I don't have definitive numbers here, but that's got to be a minimum of $100,000. You talk about procurement. If we were to go down that road, we would probably need to make that decision rather quickly, because there are definitive timelines with procurement, and we would need to begin that. If we went down that road, we would need to begin that project fairly soon. Again, kind of like what happened a few years ago with the turf field, just about the same time. But we were tapping into E&D, but we were up against a deadline then as well, because if that 250 hadn't been spent, if you will, by June 30, we would have lost the ability to access those dollars. So that's something else that's kind of out there, and this may be an opportunity to look at that. But again, Daryl and I and Bob, we've discussed this. We've got a game plan that frankly kind of changes on a daily basis, given what things cross Daryl's desk.
Yeah, and I can tell you that's when we're looking at what we need to do, Carl. I think you're hitting the nail on the head, because operations and maintenance, there are so many little things that we need to hit, and this year we've been hitting so much, but it's a good place to there's always money to be spent in operations and maintenance on the buildings. There's always money to be spent. So that's a place that we've been talking about. Like Dan said, ECC, that is an area, I think 100,000 probably conservative in terms of what that amount might be to fix some of the things that we're looking at. And it's not fixing, it's updating. It's, really, most of the HVAC systems in that building, and I believe this is correct, Dan, are the original. They weren't updated when we renovated the building 20 years ago. So we're talking, 60, 50 years old for that wing, where ECC is. So definitely something we want to do.
I would just caution the committee that you're also talking construction, and things happen in construction. That's why there are change orders, and I'm just saying, and we're gonna really have to look long and hard at this, because what may be a buck and a quarter, so to speak, may end up being 200,000, 75,000 in change orders. They may be working in an area that is saturated with asbestos. I'm just giving an example. And the remediation for asbestos is thousands and thousands of dollars. And I'm not trying to be that guy. I'm not trying to spoil the party. But I just say, we just need to be cautious about this. And obviously, if we were to get into this and go down that road, that does reduce the balance for sure. So we may be talking 1.4, 1.5, or 1.7, but that may go down to $1 million or less if we get involved with projects that have surprises. And with construction, there are surprises. That's all I'm saying. You can't see behind walls.
I may be completely off base here, but I think one related thing to this thing that I'm hearing is that I feel like this year, with the funds we've gotten and the need for moving fast, we've probably done some projects that in previous years we would have asked the towns to pay for. Is that true? Have we taken on projects over that number?
No, not like that.
Okay.
So the only place where we put money into the building at that level was Paxton, and what Paxton did is they actually paid us back. They covered all the costs for it, so they used because they ended up getting stimulus money, that original package from the state. they actually gave that money. They gave a portion of it to us. So we did all the work, paid for it, and then they reimbursed us.
$33,000 and change.
Yeah. So it didn't even reach the threshold.
That's what they had available in terms of their balance. And again, hey, 33,000. Thank you.
Is there other things from this area of the agenda people want? All right, Dan. So this is kind of related, right? I think the next items on your agenda, which are motions that you're asking us to consider. I have my own version of this in front of me, but they keep appearing and disappearing from the screen. They're back again. In terms of asking the subcommittee to make a recommendation to the full committee, I think that I'll ask for those motions in a second. What I'd ask is once we make them, you've gone through this, you have, and I'm not asking for a complete rehash. The question that people will ask is, why are we moving so much money around? I think the short answer of that is there's positions we didn't hire, right? And there were unanticipated expenses, unemployment insurance, in particular operating costs, of course, because of the world we're living in, and that is a rebudgeting that we're doing. Is that going to be a fair assessment?
Yes, it is. Yep.
Okay.
It's to the point. Yep.
All right.
So just Ken into the group, Daryl or Randy Jacob spoke with Mike briefly, and Mike has asked if this be added to the agenda. I think it is for April 12th, but I kept it on our agenda. I mean, you can certainly support these since we're here tonight, and again, as you said, I've talked about this, and the reasons why these are two of the bigger transfers. And actually, this is a policy. In looking at the transfer policy, Ken, I became aware, and I learned this, that actually I should be bringing transfers to you folks on a quarterly basis, and as opposed to towards the fourth quarter of the year, which I'll make note of. But I'd like to get it on your radar now. And again, you know all the reasons why.
Do you want to know from these numbers tonight, or will the numbers slightly change before the April 12th meeting? Do we need to meet between now and then, or?
I'd like us to meet, certainly, Ken. If the full committee's meeting on April 12th, then let's just assume that we're going to meet again, not definitively, but let's assume that we're going to meet on April 5th. I can include these then for sure. The second motion, again, just looking at the activity, I projected out what the assessment is going to be from DOR, and the numbers have been steady for the past couple months. I'll hold off again, so long as we are going to meet on or before the next meeting. And benefits and insurance, sure, we can hold off on that as well. That number might go up, or we might make a further adjustment. So sure, that's fine. So long as we, yes, the answer is yes. We'll hold off.
Okay. Now, a substantial portion of the subcommittee is not here tonight to ask this question, just related to, since we're on this topic of holding off or not. April 5th in some places of the world would be a holiday. Is that an issue for people to be meeting on April the 5th? People who are here?
Which Holland? It is not for me, but
it's
Easter is the 4th.
It's Easter Monday, yeah. So
well, yeah, that's true. I forgot that some places.
We can meet any day that week, Ken. We can. I mean, here we are on a Thursday night. We can certainly look at another night that week.
I'm fine with Monday. I just want to make sure at least the 3 people who would make quorum here are okay with April the 5th. All right, so we'll plan that for 7 p.m. on April the 5th, and that way, just in case you have to tweak the numbers or choose to tweak the numbers between now and then, we're not voting on something and then we're voting on it again. I know it's projections; they probably won't change, but you know, there's no harm in it. So the next item on the agenda is financial. I'm sorry, is there a FEMA update that you want to give us? Yeah.
There is. Let me just get there. So this is an email that I received from my guy. My rep is Joshua Rosales, and as you can see, he's making me aware a week ago that the application was approved. And then secondly, this is an email that I received from the state, and then there's a letter, and I had actually sent Daryl a note later on today. You know, maybe he wants to include this in the packet. This is the official letter from the state on the award. I actually have a grant application. Yes, we've already submitted a grant, as you well know, of 129,000 and change. Now that 112 has been approved, but now there's another grant, and this is it here, and this is the very comprehensive document that I need to respond to by the end of April. So it's official. You know, we're getting 112. We're not going to see it. We are not going to see it before June 30. And that when we do receive it, it's going to be in the form of a mini grant of $112,000. And again, these next 25 pages, which I'm not going to get into, are documents that we'll need to sign to get this, for us to get our share of FEMA of 112,000. I'm still going forward. You know, once Deputy Superintendent Burlow and I wrap up, you know, his grants and COVID grants, and again the balance that's in that undesignated, we're going to put forward in a second application. And again, just things are flying, things are changing. Seems like on a daily basis. Especially with these grants, and whatever Bob can't back into his grant, or we can't reverse into his grant, you know, I'll put through FEMA. But given the fact that we submitted the first application in September and it's taken, you know, this long, it'll probably be pushing a year. We're going to look to get that second one in before the end of the fiscal year, and with any luck, we'll see it sometime late next spring. Assuming it gets approved.
Okay. Well, that's good, and thank you for your work on facilitating that application. I know it's a lot of paperwork and original receipts I see in the letter, not photocopies, right, of things, and that you know is a lot of paperwork for a good amount of money, but also it's a lot of paperwork for not millions of dollars. So we appreciate all the energy you guys are putting into keeping track of all of those expenses. The people in the subcommittee have questions about this avenue.
I appreciate that level of detail and being able to see, you know, exactly what's going where, and also knowing it's actually happening. That's always useful. So I did want to say thank you for that. Yeah, I know you are hoping for more staff, because I see that and I just think how much time and energy it takes to keep up with all this extra paperwork this year, which is challenging. So I appreciate that, and I know it's not an easy process.
That is an example of a one-time expense, right? If it's, you know, does a district need to hire a part-time manager of federal grants that's basically a contract position as opposed to a permanent employee? I mean, those are the sort of things that, you know, I'm not advocating one or the other for there, but if there is an extraordinary amount of work, sometimes you need a person to do it for a short amount of time, you know.
Yeah, and what I can tell you, Ken, I know of at least one, if not two, tech schools that hire, they contract out with people to do that. So they're not hiring a full-time person, but then that person is in charge of like their Title I grant, any type of entitlement grants. They write them. They make sure that they're getting followed through with. I've been thinking about that moving forward because again, we're all wearing a lot of hats right now. So
Yeah. I mean, I in my office when I was in grad school, we had in higher ed, we had 2 people that did that because we had so many federal grants, and that's how we did it. So I wondered when I saw this, I said, this is just one grant and we've had to reapply for it at least twice that we're aware of. So that's just hours of work. So, I mean, that may be something certainly to look into. I mean, I certainly would, if you go that direction, in theory, I certainly would support that because I think it's a lot of work that takes you all away from other things.
And I think a successful example of that, you talked about Ms. Soper's work with the reimbursements, and it cost the district a lot of money when so many things kind of fell by the wayside because it was just so much detail, so many people, so many receipts, so many reports, and having someone do that gives, I'm sure, Dan a great deal of confidence, right? That at least there's one box that he can feel good about, right, without having to micromanage every receipt. And sometimes these investments are payoff, right? So the next item on our agenda, I believe, was the district indicators, right?
Yes, Ken. So I'm going to defer. I'm going to pass baton on to you. You had asked me to include this. This was discussed at management recently. So you're up.
So Chair Dennis, has had a long-term interest in having a easy to see dashboard, right, to see how the district is operating year over year. Dan, would you mind muting just for a second so I can hear myself?
I'm sorry. Sorry.
That's okay. So for instance, right, education has spent a bit of time in trying to get some red light, green light, yellow light indicators for be it MCAS, be it Panorama, what have you. And the chair asked all the subcommittees to think about that from their work. Again, I don't think this is a goal of make work. I think this is a goal of looking for data that we have and seeing what we think would be meaningful to give a perspective of how we're tracking, right? And at least for me, it would seem to make sense that some sort of year over year comparison of appropriation line is kind of what I would think, right? To see, how are we over a 5-year period asking, how are salaries going? How is textbooks, and, breaking it down in useful ways to see how we're making continual investments in our resources, right? So our resources in people and our resources in supplies and technology, and then perhaps some number that's tracking how our budget increases and how the town contributions increase, so that we can look at it and tell a story, right? Like we have kept our budget to this % increase over the past 6 years on average. This is what fraction was people, this is what fraction was books, this is how the town went up disproportionately. Just something simple like that, a 4-line, 5-6-line Excel sheet of data we already have, strikes me as what we might be interested in, but I'm anxious to hear what the rest of you would think about that. Like,
I have to think about it some more because it's all new information, but based on what you just said is something I think I've wished we've had several times. Just something that simple to illustrate, our budget from year to year and the town contribution. And I don't know if it's useful to show, it might get too complicated, but the town contribution is closely connected to what we get from the state, which is beyond our control, but varies a lot. So I don't know if that's something we have to also think about. It's beyond our control, but it does affect the assessments to the towns in some way. So I don't know if there's just a simple way in a graph or something to convey that from year to year, but I've often wished we could because I think it would help illustrate some things that we don't currently do.
But I mean, just the salary line, the benefit line,
Yeah.
the textbook and technology line, percent overall increase and percent increase to the towns could be like a 6-line thing. I think I said 6 things, right? Salaries, benefits, textbook, technology, percent increase and percent increase to the towns. They're all in they're all in your books. Like, they're not like, this isn't like something we're pulling from making you do a bunch of work, right? And just showing those over the course of years gives us a sense of where's the money going and where's it coming from. I guess that's what would interest me, and I'm also not interested in making a whole bunch of work asking complicated questions. I don't know. What do you think about this, Daryl, in terms of?
Yeah, so it's funny. I was just pulling up. Remember, Ken, we had looked at the radar, the district analysis review tool.
Mhm.
And I don't know if Malaya or Carl, you've seen that before, but it's a DESI program. It's an Excel program, and you can basically compare districts throughout the Commonwealth to your own district. And what it does do is that it breaks down how we end up breaking down our end of the year report. So you can look at our per pupil expenditure by category. So admin, instructional leadership, teachers, teaching services, professional development. So it's another way to maybe take information. I like your concept. I like the concept of, taking what we've already collected through our budget books and just building a kind of a story around that, using visuals. But what I also like about the radar piece is that you can say, hey, here's information compared to other districts. And there's a lot of really nice information in here in reference to what we spend on teaching, what we spend on instructional support and supplies over the years. It's a good program. I can't share this with you because I don't know how to share Excel because it's in a different window. It's not in the Google window, so I don't know how to share it. But
Can you send it to me? Are you in Radar now?
yeah, and all Radar it's an Excel spreadsheet, right? So you just so it's downloaded on my desktop right now.
It's huge though. I've been to it.
But you can get a summary sheet, which is what I think is what Daryl's talking about. And we've looked at this before. It picks towns or districts that are similar in demographic and size, right? And often they're in Eastern Massachusetts, so some of the per pupil thing is a little bit meh. But it does give us a sense over years of how we I think that the DART tool could be doing the things I was discussing, right? I think that you just want to give it to us and have it be, I think what Chair Dennis wants to see is he wants to see it as a 5-year running thing.
Yeah.
So that we can see trends, right? Like, hey, look, we were spending this much on administration, which was super low. Then we spent a little bit more because we hired Bob, so we can kind of see, okay, well, that's how we made that change, right? Or, but we're still super low, right, in terms of that line. So I think the DART tool is nice because there's no spin on it, right? I know I've heard from other people in town, oh, you're spinning by using this data, but it comes from DESI, right? Like, it's not something we made up.
Right.
So I think that, it's free of our interpretive bias if we use the DART tool to generate these comparison data. So maybe what you could do for us is instead of trying to figure out how to share it right now, because we're kind of passing our 9 o'clock target, maybe it could be in the packet for next business and finance meeting. And because it's really just a matter of printing it out and seeing if now when you do that, I've always looked at it as just a 1-year thing. Can you do like a look back or?
Yeah, they have a change over 5 years. So enrollment, district school leadership FTEs, expenditures by source fund, in-district expenditures per pupil, FTEs non-SPED versus SPED, MCAS, all over 5 years. And it gives you really nice charts to go along with it. So I think that's definitely worthwhile in terms of looking at.
Yeah, so maybe you can send that to us and also maybe send to us, as you say, the really nice charts, which is what I've normally looked at as I've made a really nice chart rather than, as Malaya says, the huge, Excel file. And share that with us at the next meeting. And ideally, the things that I think with these indicators should be things where you go to DART and you push a button or 5 buttons and you print out something that the Commonwealth has created for us. It's benchmarked. It's not us, randomly counting different things differently, and it gives us that year-over-year comparison. So I think that makes it simple. So maybe we can just leave that on the agenda for next time and look at those data.
Sure. And I think, Dan, I think you're correct. Maybe what we'll do next time as well is, I'll share this with you with what we've pulled up, and then you can you can pull it up on your PC, and then it'll be fine.
And it can also just be part of that huge PDF file that we get to if you have the chance.
Yep.
So other people have input or concerns about this?
Just to add, and I don't know if this radar tool kind of gives you the information as well, but as part of that, as part of the picture, being able to look at changes in the total amount of money that we've gotten from the state has that, because those percentage increases haven't been consistent. And so you've got the Chapter 70, the regional transportation, but you look at circuit breaker, which it seems like it's been a little more consistent, but you look at all of these other sources of revenue that I think that's it. At least to me, it seems like that's an important piece of the puzzle when we're talking about how things change year over year in terms of, because this upcoming year, what we've got coming from the state is a little bit of a dip. And so it at least helps paint the picture to say the state was funding us at a pretty consistent, moderate increase or whatever, and then or maybe they haven't, because I haven't even looked at that information. So
so Carl,
it seems like that would be.
Yeah, Carl, they actually have expenditures by source fund, and it's over 5 years, and it shows you what the expenditures associated with the overall district budget. So we're up to 100 million. The district has picked up more of that money versus the state amount. So the state's kind of leveling off, the district's picking up more. So that's where you start to see that difference. So, and it's an interactive spreadsheet in terms of, or graph. So when you hold it over something, it'll tell you, okay, series revolving funds, and it tells you the value and everything. So it's an excellent, they did a good job with this one.
And again, I think the goal here is dashboard, right? So we wouldn't want to provide a 1,000-page Excel file, which we need for budget books and for line item budgets. Something that people can look at and be like, oh, right, and as Bob Imber often points out when he goes to Princeton, he needs to tell a story, right? And he needs to tell what I always tell my students is you need an elevator pitch, right? You don't need it's not an hour-long seminar in finance. It's convince me who knows nothing to fund your budget by the time this bell dings on floor 12, right? So that's what I think we're looking for when we talk about these indicators. So I think next time on our agenda was discussion of Director Didi's contract, and the superintendent here. My take on this, and I'm not chair of the committee anymore, but when I was, and we hired Dan, I believe we had changed our supervision in such that the school committee had, in my mind, inappropriately been directly supervising the director of business and finance, at least in part due to history, recent history with the previous situation. The school committee still hires, just like we hire the director of special education. Technically, I guess we hire the nurses, although we never really do that. So I suspect that Chair Dennis would have to sign, whatever would be, and then perhaps business and finance can make a recommendation. But at least from my perspective, I'd be looking to the superintendent, who is the supervisor of this position, to be making recommendations about contracts that the subcommittee could choose to endorse if it sees fit. But I think that really should originate, at least in my perspective, and I'll hear what other people in the subcommittee think, from the supervisor of the position, as informed by the evaluation. Daryl, where are you with? I know we're passing it over. We're not really talking about it, but just since you're here,
yes.
Yeah.
So again, we completed the evaluation for Dan's evaluation. Gosh, last December, I believe. It
You
was.
want me to leave the room, by the way? I'm happy to step out.
I think this is just process. I don't think
Okay.
we're.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So so the evaluation process has been, completed. I think again, what we have to do. School committee does have the oversight associated with, and Dan and I talked about this a little bit today. Chair Dennis would have to be the one to sign off. So I would, as Dan's evaluator, I make the recommendation to say, yeah, I want to keep Dan on. We want to pull a contract together and have that ready because his contract expires the end of June. So we would just, again, maybe at the next meeting, kind of go through kind of what the process is, recommendations and so forth, and then take that next step.
Yeah, and again, I'm just talking process here, Dan, so your ears don't have to burn too hard. But
Yep.
if I was, in the shoes of a person whose contract expired in June, I'd want some sense of urgency about doing this because, it just seems appropriate and respectful to not have what one might call a lame duck kind of situation for too long. So.
Yep.
I appreciate that.
So maybe you can be prepared with a recommendation at our next meeting. And while these conversations are sometimes uncomfortable, if we're discussing performance, unless we're talking about like salary and negotiations, it really isn't subject to executive session. The executive session rules can be for contract negotiations, or they can be for more personal things like, I don't want to go through them because they don't all sound nice, but things that are in executive session. But for a public employee, we can't talk about performance in executive session, right? That has to be an open session, as uncomfortable as it can be, and as you experience every year with us. So next meeting we can have a recommendation from you.
Yep.
Okay. And if you find it appropriate to have an executive session for executive session reasons, just let Randy know, and we can do that.
Yeah, we should be all set.
Yeah. So the minutes of the March 2nd meeting, I believe, were included in the attachment in the call to meeting for the Google invite. So does anybody wish to make a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting?
I did not see them. So I had a document that was not. So you all can vote on them, but I don't know if you can if I didn't.
No, let's
There's
not.
only two of you.
Yeah, let's.
Because I had a document that opened to something that was not an actual document, so I have not read them.
Let's see if we can maybe ask Randy to include them as an actual attachment. And I like them to things being in the meeting invitation, but sometimes it does get goofy. Particularly, like I have a bunch of Gmail accounts, and
Yeah.
this isn't my dominant Gmail account. So
yes, it's happened to me as well. I see. What you're saying. So it opens up in your personal account.
It tries to open in my work account and then says it's not there, right? And then I have to log out of my work account and log into the WRC account, and so maybe I don't want to go. I want to pass this over if Member Gustafson hasn't had the opportunity to read them, especially since there's only 3 of us here, so we can always do the minutes next time.
And on top, I mean, I would add, it looks like, and I don't know if there was like a draft of the draft, because like it says like call to order, subcommittee chair called the meeting to order at, and there's a blank, and then election of vice chair is blank, like vote, and so I don't know.
Is that the template? Sometimes we've gotten the template that's not the actual minutes.
It may be that, but that was what was in the attachment in the calendar invite.
So let's ask Dan, if you can ask Randy to check into this and send it as an attachment for our next meeting. I think Member Mitchell took the minutes, is my memory of it at the last time. I apologize to you two who were here when it was one of you. I think at one point she didn't have the notes because she was asking me who took them not that long ago. So let's just come back to that. We already discussed our next meeting, so we'll try for 7 p.m. on Monday, April 5th. Seeing as how the next item on our agenda is adjournment, I would take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right, so
Easy.
so we'll take a roll call vote. Member Otmar,
Yes.
Member Gustafson,
Yes.
and Member Mills says yes. So we are adjourned. I'm going to turn off the recording, and thank you all for